Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to join the City of Kingston's online engagement session for the 2022 city budgets. Joining us this evening is Housing and Social Services, and we will officially begin at 5:30. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to join the City of Kingston's online engagement session for the 2022 budgets. Stay close. Our session will begin in just 1 minute. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to join us on this Monday evening for the City of Kingston's online engagement session for the 2022 budgets. This evening is our fourth and our final virtual budget session of this engagement series, and we will be hearing from Housing and Social Services. My name is Julie Lee Stitt. I'm a Corporate Communications Officer with the City of Kingston, and I will be moderating this online engagement session. So this evening's session is live streamed and it is recorded. Welcome to those who are joining us that way. A quick note that we have posted the link to the live stream on our social media channels. So if you are following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, if you could hop over and share that link with your networks now, that would be great. I also want to thank the 21 people who RSVP'd for this evening's session so that you might join us here on Zoom. To protect your privacy and the privacy of all participants, the video, microphone, and chat features are turned off. This means that anything that you enter into the chat feature will only be visible to myself as well as other panelists. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you might leverage that chat feature if absolutely necessary. So that chat feature, technology troubleshooting, we know that it can happen. Before I get to some common solutions for some common problems, I just want to note that if you are familiar with the Zoom platform, so you've been joining us for these virtual sessions, then you know that you can adjust your view options so that you can see both the presentation and the presenter at the same time, which is a nice added feature. I would also note that if you're a newbie to Zoom, perhaps just leave the platform as you found it. You will find that you're able to follow the presentation just the same. If you find that you do encounter any technical issues, I would recommend that you visit getinvolvedkingston.ca, where we have posted some resources that can help you troubleshoot that. And you can access those resources at www.getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca. Another option is to use Google to search some options. I know Zoom has a wealth of resources that way. And then there is the chat tool. So we do have IT support with us this evening, my colleague Colin. So if you find that you're running into IT issues, then you can let us know about it in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen in the toolbar. I will note that sometimes the easiest solution is just logging off and rejoining, especially when we're trying to assist remotely. It can be a little bit difficult and a little hairy sometimes. I also want to underline that we do have the option to call into the meeting. So if for some reason your internet connection goes down, there is a phone number on the screen, which I would encourage you to take a photo of now or to jot down with a pen on some paper. And the number is 1778 907 2071. And this is a number that you would have also received in your confirmation email if you're joining us on Zoom this evening. And the webinar ID is 925 4533 2241. And finally, you have the option to follow along on YouTube. As I noted, we are live streaming there. So asking questions, we have a great presentation lined up for you this evening. We will be getting to your questions at the end of the presentation. That said, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a toolbar with a Q&A icon. And at any point in this evening's session, you can click into that and type in your question. As noted on the screen, your name and the question will be visible to all participants, so bear that in mind. And if you are joining us by phone this evening and you would like to ask a question verbally, please save that for the Q&A period, and you would indicate that you want to ask a question by pressing *6 on your phone. And what that will do is trigger the raise hand function, at which point as the moderator, I would enable your audio so that you could ask your question to the project team. I also want to note that if you are joining us online on Zoom, you can also use the raise hand tool and ask your question verbally that way. Again, we'll be saving those for the Q&A period. Q&A responses will be shared in the project reporting back document. So all of the questions and answers will be summarized by the project team and posted on the project page on Get Involved Kingston, and this which you'll be able to access. So before I hand the presentation over to the project team, the reason why you joined us this evening, I'd like to draw your attention to the guidelines for participation, which should now be visible on your screen. So these guidelines for participation were developed by the city in collaboration with the community. And my question to all attendees is there anything additional you would like to have added to the guidelines for this engagement session? So I'm just going to give everyone a few moments to read the guidelines currently on the screen. In terms of directions, I would say that to confirm that everyone agrees, we would ask that if you are not in agreement, please use the raise hand function. So again, if you're joining us online, it should be visible at the bottom of your screen in the toolbar, and by phone, it would be *6. All right, thank you. So seeing no objections to the guidelines for participation on the screen, we will proceed into this online engagement session. And I'm going to pass the presentation over to Desiree Kennedy, the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer.
Thanks, Julie Lee. Welcome everyone to our fourth and our final installment of the 2022 City Budget Virtual Sessions. Glad to have those with us tonight that are participating or listening in. For those of you that are attending for the first time, or if you've missed one or two or the previous three sessions that we've done, you can hear these recorded sessions on our getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca page under the 2022 City Budget Engagement tab. So I encourage you to go back and listen to the 3 that we've previously had for Recreation and Leisure Services, the Cataraqui Conservation Authority, and Kingston Police. And you can certainly find those recorded sessions online at that link. As I've mentioned previously, we have gotten some feedback from last year's budget engagement that confirmed that our sessions were a little long. There was a lot of information and not as much opportunity for questions and discussion. And so in response to that, our process has included 4 different and very focused sessions on specific areas of interest that were based on feedback that we'd received last year. So in that regard, tonight, we're welcoming Ruth Noordegraaf. Ruth oversees our Housing and Social Services Department for the City of Kingston. But before we get going, I want to start by providing a bit of context for some of the input and the feedback that we're hoping to get from tonight's session and from our overall budget engagement. Next slide, please. You'll have lots of opportunity tonight to have your say on how your tax dollars are spent. Citizen engagement and feedback is very important to us, and it can help to improve by better understanding what the public wants with respect to services and service levels, particularly in context with the limited resources. We recognize that municipal budgeting process is a very broad concept with many inputs into the process and certainly many areas where we can benefit from public input. So in order to manage that, we've provided some possible themes that will summarize some of what we're hoping to hear from the community tonight and through our budget engagement process as a whole. So built on a continuous improvement culture that we support and focus on at the city, these themes have been summarized into 2 different categories. So the first one is effectiveness of service and service levels. And we're really looking for input from the public, from the community on, is the department agency providing the right services at the right level? Are the services meeting the objectives or the needs of the community? And are there services or service levels that are not required? So that's the effectiveness piece of those services. We're also looking at the efficiency of services, or what you might call the value for the dollars that have been spent. And in that regard, thinking about how can the department provide these services more efficiently. So it just provides a little bit of context in terms of maybe perhaps some of the questions that you might be thinking about, among others, as we work through tonight's session. Next slide, please. So in terms of the summary for tonight, a bit of an agenda. Tonight you will hear from Ruth Noordegraaf. As I said, Ruth is the Director of Housing and Social Services, and she's going to cover off a number of service and budget related topics. She'll be starting by talking about an overview of the department's services and their service levels. A bit about their current priorities and initiatives, so what they will be focusing on, what they're focusing on today, and what's important going forward. How the services are funded, so that will include whether they're funded from property taxes or whether there's other non-tax revenue sources. And then Ruth will be providing us with just a little bit of a picture as to what the budget challenges are and some of the strategies that they're using to address those challenges. And then probably most importantly, the last item is your feedback and input and your questions and the question and answer period. So we're certainly looking forward to that. Next slide, please. So Ruth, welcome. Thanks for agreeing to be here with us tonight. To start things off, I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about the types and the levels of services that you're providing to the community.
Thank you so much, Desiree, and thanks for having me as part of this engagement, because I know there's a lot to unpack in the housing and social services budgets. So to answer your question, if we could move to the next slide, I first wanted to point out that as a department, we are one of the 47 service managers in the province of Ontario that is ultimately responsible to plan, manage, and fund a variety of different social services. Oh, and I think I see the slides move around, but we'll get back to the one that, here we go. So we're one of the 47 service managers, and as a department, our services not only touch the residents of the City of Kingston, but our jurisdiction is also the County of Frontenac. So our services also are provided within the county, and we have a shared kind of service agreement with the county to do so. Mainly, our department is focusing on 3 key areas. We have close to 100 staff that work hard day in, day out on those direct and indirect services that we provide. We are providing social assistance or like income assistance. Most people are familiar with that through the term Ontario Works. We are obviously providing housing and homelessness programming and services, and we are providing childcare and earlier services. And we'll dive a little bit deeper on the specific services and the impact of all 3 of those in the next few slides. So moving to the next slides, starting with social assistance. Just to give you an idea of our impact in the community, we typically have a caseload of 2,000 to 2,500 individuals in the community that require social assistance. And Ontario Works is really that. It's a temporary financial assistance. The allowance is set by the province, the allowance rates, and we are working with the clients to ultimately support them in their journey to ideally employment. We also, in addition to that, provide discretionary benefits, for instance, to support people that are at risk of homelessness or specific health benefits. And lastly, in the kind of social assistance area, we're also providing or managing the municipal fee assistance program, which is providing low-income families reduced or free services such as recreation, transit, and cultural passes. So the next slide, diving into the second kind of area in our departments. And I actually should say, sorry, just quickly on the social assistance side, that those services are provided in-house through our case managers and clerks, and is the largest kind of staff portion of our departments. The childcare and early years, here we are funding through the funding that we receive from the province and some of our municipal funding, over 35 licensed childcare centers with operational funding and over 25 early on program sites. Early on is a drop-in program for children 0 to 6 with their parents free of charge. We also provide childcare subsidies for lower income families, typically up to 1,500 children a year, and we manage the wait list for childcare. And then the next slide, and I know housing and homelessness has been, very, very much a priority for many of us. We are providing, you can kind of divide housing and homelessness in 3 different areas. We are managing and funding the homelessness system, and we provide funding to agencies that provide shelter, street outreach, prevention and diversion, benefits, and housing first. We also are responsible for the management of the social housing or rent geared to income housing in our community. And we are mandated by the province to manage 2,000 units, or 2,003 to be correct, which is mandated through the Housing Services Act, which is a provincially mandated expectation. Those units are provided by actual bricks and mortar units, which are about 1,500, and also rent supplements and portable housing benefits. We also manage the centralized waitlist for social housing, which at this point has approximately 1,150 people, and about close to 200 of those are already housed in social housing but are waiting for a transfer. The last area in the housing and homelessness kind of system is that we are responsible for and manage as a department is the affordable housing developments. And I just added a few examples. Of course, we all are quite familiar with a lot of the new affordable housing development projects, but we also manage programs such as home ownership that provides a down payment for first home buyers. We support renovations for low-income homeowners, and we also have an affordable secondary suite program. And just to visualize that, because housing is a complex, sector, and I know it's been very much highlighted over the last year, last few years. On the next slides, you will see an image that is visualizing what we call the housing continuum. And you will see that this starts on the kind of the emergency housing side and moves all the way to the market housing. And our role at Housing and Social Services is really to, again, manage and funds the emergency housing, the social and supportive housing, and the affordable housing developments. And I think on the next slides, I just wanted to wrap up our services to the community with three other kind of key items that we are involved in. The first one is we are managing subsidized homemaking services, which is a service to low-income residents that may need additional care, such as some cleaning or meal prepping or laundry, should they be ill or elderly and not able to do that themselves. We also are very involved, again, because of the social services and the human services that we are involved in with the collaboration with many of our community partners that do very important work in the community. And one of the examples, for instance, is the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan that was recently endorsed by City Council and that we're currently working on implementing, or we're currently creating an implementation plan for that. So I think that sums up kind of the services that we provide this.
Thanks, Ruth. So based on some of the feedback that we've received this year already, and certainly from last year's budget engagement, there's a lot of interest in these services that you've described, particularly in the affordable housing area. And I expect, like a lot of other agencies and city departments, you face the challenges that come with an increasing demand for services and obviously limited financial resources. So in that regard, can you provide further information to us on what the department's current and upcoming priorities and initiatives are?
Thanks, and absolutely. I know housing, again, is top of mind, but also a lot of the human services that ultimately support our residents in the community. So we have many priorities, but I really wanted to kind of summarize the key ones that I think are very timely as well for the conversation tonight. So first of all, not only is the priority still to kind of respond to the pandemic, it's still ongoing. We're still working through different service restrictions and impacts for the services while we're kind of trying to understand what kind of quote unquote back to normal will look like for a lot of the services that we fund. We also are planning more longer term and try to anticipate what the pandemic recovery will look like. And we obviously are looking at, needs of families and individuals, not only in the next few months, but also in the next few years. So that's a big priority, and really trying to wrap our heads around that. Again, like the next one is probably not a surprise, but we really are trying to, with the tools that we have, to increase the housing supply and the housing affordability. And in the next slide, I will show you a couple of projects that we're working on in that area. We also, I know homelessness has been very much, discussed in this community. And of course, it's a very big area in our departments. We are currently wrapping up or in the midst of the final stages of our homelessness system review, which we will be bringing to council in the fall, and also will start implementing with our providers. And then we also, and again, because we're so many of our programs are mandated and legislated by the province, we're really, our main priority is to try to stay on top of the provincial changes in services and the funding models. One of the examples here is the Human Services Integration Project. I just mentioned that we have 3 different areas that we work in, and we really want to focus on how we are providing that one-stop shop for clients that need services, so they can access their childcare, their Ontario Works, and their housing needs with one worker or one access points. So we're working through that to really look at how we can best serve our clients and best effectively provide them the services that they need. So and the other 2 examples here are for instance, we're managing through with our 16 different housing providers that are providing social housing for us. We're working through some of the end of operating agreements, and again, trying to look at how we can more effectively use the funding that we fund to operate social housing, and maybe look at different opportunities, for instance, increasing the number of portable housing benefits. And we're managing through the ending provincial and federal rent supplements and finding some solutions for that. And I already touched on the community safety and well-being plan. So I think those are priorities. And then the next slides, I just wanted to highlight, sorry. Oh, I think that's not the slide I was expecting. Sorry.
That's right. Ruth, I'm just going to jump in here. I did add this slide, and it's an element that we added to add to the experience of attendees. So it's a quick poll, and you're open to participate if you're comfortable doing so. It's a good question. So on the screen, we have some details. So this is mentimeter.com. And if you open your web browser or you have a smartphone handy, which I know many of us do these days, and you type in www.menti.com and you enter in the code 66734357, which you'll also see in the top of the slide, then you can answer the multiple choice question on the screen. And the question that we are asking tonight is, how many affordable housing units has the city developed since 2006? Okay, so we have some responses coming in. A couple of people thinking that it's probably around 350. And then the other option, because we are a smaller group, is if you wanted to, you could also put your response in the chat feature. But this is just something to add to the interactivity of the session. We know it's a Monday evening in July, and we thought this might be an element that would add to your experience as an attendee. Okay. So a reminder that if you wanted to participate in the poll on your smartphone or in your web browser, you would type in www.menti.com and you would enter the code 66734357. And I apologize, Ruth. I should have let you know that I had added this in. It's kind of, like skipping ahead in the slides. I'm keeping you on your toes. So you're welcome for that.
Well, it worked.
Okay, so we seem to be holding at 350, and I'm actually going to turn the presentation back over to you, Ruth, because you're going to be answering this question in an upcoming slide. So I will proceed to the next slide and turn it back over.
Thank you for that intermezzo. So yeah, actually the right answer is 450. So for those that participated, you were very close. And I will say, obviously we would like to see that number much higher, and we're working really hard to as a community, because as a city, we don't necessarily build housing units ourselves, to work really on adding more affordable housing units. And just to kind of get you a sense of the various projects that are currently in the works, we just added this slide, and we also added the municipal capital contribution towards those projects. And keep in mind that all these projects quite often have 3 levels of government support, ranging from obviously city municipal capital contribution to provincial and federal contribution. So this is just to give you a bit of a taste of the different type of projects that we're working on. Supportive housing, council just approved a tiny homes pilot project, and also the kind of more, I would say, affordable housing developments project. So really a mixed kind of list of projects, and hopefully, again, we'll be able to add many more as a community to respond to the needs. So I think that's that kind of is kind of the main kind of response, Des. So I think back to you.
Thanks, Ruth. So since this is a budget session, I know our participants will be interested in what it costs to provide all these services to the community and how you fund those costs. So can you give us a feel for what your operating and your capital budgets look like?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we'll start with the operating budgets on the next slide. We've tried to summarize the budgets, and I would like to walk through kind of the high level details. So our full, basically our full expenditures each year on the operating side are $78 million. But you will also see that approximately or close to 60 million of that is provided through federal and provincial grants and subsidies. And if you go on the right, if you look at the right side of the screen, and sorry, I just have to move my own face so I can actually see that. You will see the breakout of that of those grants and subsidies by program. So you will see that the biggest chunk of that is going towards Ontario Works. And again, most of that is the actual allowances that go to clients that are predetermined and set by the province. Also, quite a large chunk will go to the childcare services, which is going towards the operating dollars for childcare centers, childcare subsidies, etc. The housing services is receiving approximately $9 million through grants and subsidies. And the largest component, about $4 million of that, is actually provincial dollars that go towards homelessness services. Then if you go to the kind of the municipal contribution of our programming, and you go to the bottom little table, you will notice that approximately 17 or just over $17 million is the municipal contribution to our departments. The largest part is the housing services budgets. Again, most of that will go towards the social housing operating dollars, homelessness, rent supplements, etc. And then smaller portions go towards Ontario Works and childcare services, and those are kind of the shared costs for administration that we provide to keep these programs running. So I hope that gives you a bit of an understanding of kind of our budget, operating budget each year. So we do have a large budget, but a lot of that is flowing through from the province to either clients or providers directly. And then on the next slide, we just we've summarized our capital budgets. So each year we create a capital budget based on what we have available to ultimately create more affordable housing, plan for more affordable housing, and also support the operating of existing projects. And you will see here that it's a mix between operating buildings that we've purchased, but also the development of new projects, and also supporting social housing projects. So that's kind of the two key kind of slides that summarize our operating and capital budget does.
Thanks, Ruth. So now we're going to get a bit tricky on you because we're going to ask you a two-part question. So to provide a bit more context, particularly for those that are asking questions and will be providing us with some input, it would be useful to better understand the budget challenges that you're facing today and what types of strategies that you're utilizing in addressing those challenges.
Thank you, and definitely a really good question, and very very timely question as well. You know, I think there's three main areas, and I know we can talk about this for hours probably, but I think the key thing is obviously, and you just saw that in the previous slides. Really, the provincial funding is a very large component, is really dictating a large component of our services. Not to say that we cannot, you know, have any local discretion and can do things, you know, locally to support, but it is really adding some risk and uncertainty to the way or to kind of the funding levels. Again, like if for instance the provincial government will make a change and will dictate us and our funding gets cuts back, then we need to problem solve so we can still provide those services to our clients. I think the second one, and honestly, that's something that I think many of us and probably many of you on the call it will keep us up at night, is just the ongoing anticipated increased need and demand for services. Obviously, we don't have we need to do more, and we need to really solve some of these bigger systems issues. And for instance, we need more, not only more housing supply, we also really need to find more sustainable ways for income supports. And those are the two that we manage within our department. But ultimately, we also really need to work together with other providers, healthcare providers, other social services, to really best kind of deliver services. And again, we always have to make tough decisions on what we do first with the budget that we have. And then again, the last piece is, for instance, addressing housing supply. We need capital dollars, and we have committed quite a bit of capital dollars as a city, and have been actually, I'm sure some of you have heard last week that we received some federal dollars to address some housing supply needs. But quite often those are time limited, or they have very specific eligibility criteria that do not always fit locally with when and what we would like to do. And quite often they are application based. So even though we want to apply for a budget, it's not always guaranteed. So those are, I think, some of the budget challenges. There are many more, but I would kind of start with those three, Desiree.
Great, thanks, Ruth. So maybe we can move into some of the strategies that you're using to address those challenges.
Yeah, sure. Again, I think I've touched on some of them already a little bit, but first of all, we're always trying to seek out other sources of funding. For instance, we have great partnerships locally with the United Way and other funders, Community Foundation, and are really trying to again strategize who can support what project within what kind of eligibility criteria. We also, and I think again, the pandemic has really provided us with some better ideas of how to kind of be more efficient operationally. Again, like it's kind of as a good example, the provincial government required us to have paper files for all of our clients up until the pandemic, and now we're actually able to make a change and move into an electronic document management system, which ultimately is going to save space. We have a massive file room, for instance, in the office, but it's also going to provide a longer term savings with not having to store files for a certain time. And that's just one example. Obviously, working from home, having other opportunities to work at other different access points so clients can access will hopefully also, for instance, reduce some of our costs. And again, that's a good segue into the human services integration project that I just mentioned before, which also will, again, as I mentioned, hopefully help us to be more effective and efficient with the services we provide in our community that ultimately, either may save space or time. The other piece that we're always looking at as strategies is to look at lower cost solutions for the services. One of the examples is, for instance, the portable housing benefits that I just mentioned before, which is a program we rolled out a few years ago, which is rather than providing somebody in actual social housing units, we provide a client with a monthly benefit that will pay the difference between the actual rent cost and the 30% of the client's income. And that way, over the last few years, we've seen that those are much more affordable and also quite often much better for clients because they are allowing clients, for instance, to stay where they were housed, but just have that income supports to be successful. And I already mentioned electronic documents as an example. And then last but not least, I think, again, really focusing on partnerships in the community. I think, again, the pandemic has showed really great partnerships around, for instance, food security and a vulnerable sector. And we really want to make sure that we are part of those tables and help and support, the right agency doing the work or doing this, providing the supports. So we're not duplicating efforts. I think those are again, there's much more to say there, but those are the strategies that we're looking at, Desiree.
Hi, I'm going to pop back on here. Ruth, thank you so much for that presentation. As you mentioned, you went over a lot, and still there's always more that can be said on each of the elements. So I just want to mention to all attendees that following this evening's session, if you want to revisit the presentation, you can do so on YouTube, the City of Kingston's YouTube channel. We'll also be sharing this evening's recording on our Get Involved Kingston page, where you can also access the 3 previous virtual sessions. So we have now arrived at our question period, and I just want to remind everyone joining us that we do have the Q&A tool available to you at the bottom of the screen. It should be visible in the toolbar. And if anyone is joining us by phone, or you would just like to ask your question verbally, you can do so by using the raise hand function, at which point I would enable your audio. And a reminder that if you are joining by phone, you would press *6. So we do have a number of questions in the queue already, and thank you for those. And I would just note that we're going to be doing our best to get to all of the questions that we are able to this evening. However, we are only together until 6:30. So all of the questions posed will be recorded, and they will be featured in a What We Heard report. So even if we're not able to address them all this evening, they will be documented and shared with council and you, the community. So without further ado, let's get into some of these questions. So one question comes to us from Sarah, and Ruth, as someone who works in the communications department, I see this one coming up quite frequently, and I'm wondering if you can unpack it a little bit. And Sarah asks, what qualifies as affordable housing? And she knows a bit more about it than I do, because she said, is that 25% of monthly income going to rent, or is it based on market pricing and demand? Can you answer that question for us?
Yeah, I will certainly try, because it is a complicated, or it is a definition that's been used in different conversations, and they don't always mean the same thing. So Sarah, if you're kind of looking at, you are right. It's like we quite often, for instance, sorry, let me backtrack. If we're looking at social housing, so the rent geared to housing, that's where where the client in the social housing unit would never pay more than 30% of their income towards housing. That's a set kind of rule, and is something that we obviously consider affordable. So the 30% income is quite often seen as a definition. Like if somebody's paying more than 30% of their income towards housing, then it's considered unaffordable, or it's considered people are in quote unquote core housing needs. So that's what we use for social housing, for rent supplements, for portable housing benefits. We also, and kind of the second part of your question, I think the challenge is, and I know, this is a tough situation, because we know, an Ontario Works, allowance is depending on the family makeup. For instance, a single adult is typically not receiving more than approximately $750 a month. I will say, if somebody on social assistance is in social housing, there are very specific rent rates that are much lower than the 30% even of their income. Anyway, I digress. I think the other key piece with the affordable housing definition is that we are relying on the CMHC, so the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation annual percentages. So what is considered affordable for CMHC, and that's what's being used, for instance, with funding, is everything 80% or lower of the average market rent in a community. And I think the challenge, obviously, in Kingston is that the average market rent in Kingston is quite high. So 80% of that average market rent is still considered affordable, but the reality is that if people are under a certain income bracket, that still is quite a steep rent. So what we have been doing over the last, I would say, 2 years, if instead of looking, and we still are funding 80% market rent projects because there still is also that need to have the full housing continuum, but we also are looking at 60% average market, which is much closer to people's shelter allowance should they be in receipt of Ontario Works or Ontario disability support. But it certainly is a confusing and kind of definition that that also really is being used by a lot of different people, and it really depends on what specific housing projects and what specific funders sometimes as well you are talking about. I know council in general has said we want to address housing affordability. Again, it's not affordable housing, but housing affordability. So it's again touching on that full continuum of housing. So again, I can talk about that much longer, but I hope that that helps somewhat. It certainly is a confusing term.
Ruth, thank you for unpacking that a little bit. I know that it is a term with a lot of layers to it. So I found it really helpful. And I hope, Sarah, that you did too. And I'm just going to get to one more question from Sarah before I see other attendees have also added some questions to the queue. So we're just going to be letting everybody who poses a question, we're going to do our best to answer questions from all the people in the room as we're able to. But another question that Sarah posed is, will the city be investing in housing standards and social, will the city, sorry, Sarah, I read that terribly. Will the city be investing housing standards in social housing providers? So to address some issues that have been identified in terms of the conditions and perhaps even some safety and security concerns.
Thank you, Julie Lee, and thank you, Sarah, for that question. We do have a process in place, and we obviously have our colleagues at Property Standards at Planning and Building that are supporting us with the various housing standards, and it's absolutely, and it's not just social housing. I think just in general, we know that we want to make sure that with the different housing projects we have the appropriate processes in place when there are any issues. I know there's a few issues. There's obviously things that come up in the community. Unfortunately, and not just in social housing projects, but in many housing projects, we do know that there are issues with pests, and we obviously always work very closely with colleagues at Property Standards and with the proponents, either social housing proponents or market proponents, to work through that. We also through our role as the service manager, we do have the ability to always, for instance, with our role as a funder, to work through the operations with the funded housing providers. So it's absolutely on our radar, and there are processes in place that we're managing through.
Thanks, Ruth. I was just, one of our attendees was having some audio issues, so I was just trying to get that addressed. But thank you for that answer. And Sarah, thank you for that question. I know you have a number here, and we will answer as many as we are able to. But right now, we're going to hop down to a question from Claire. And Claire asks, how would someone who is looking at starting a social housing community project get started? Now, that is an excellent question. But Ruth, is it one that we can answer this evening, or does it fall a little bit outside the scope of the budget? I'm not sure if you're prepared to speak to that, or if it might be a question for one of your team, perhaps.
No, I absolutely. Well, first of all, Claire, I'm really happy that you're asking that question, because we really, again, would like to see as many housing projects and initiatives in our community, and that really does need, collaboration between many different partners. I definitely would I'm happy to take that conversation offline and connect you with one of my team members in the housing team to see what's basically needed to manage through the development of a housing project. project. There's definitely lots of steps, but we are always extremely excited to hear interest in the community to see what community groups and partners and developers can do to add to our housing supply. So let's take that conversation, or let's connect offline, and we can go from there.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that is a great question, Claire, and thank you for making that connection, Ruth. Just a reminder to all of our participants that if you do have a question that you would like to pose to the project team, you can do so by entering it, typing it into the Q&A tool. And if you are joining us by phone, you would press *6, at which point I would enable your audio. So we do have some great expertise in the room. We have Ruth, we have Desiree. And one thing I just wanted to mention before I get back to the Q&A is that in our presentation, Ruth had mentioned the homelessness system review. And that is actually, I believe there's an engagement, an open engagement on that very project on Get Involved Kingston right now. Is that right, Ruth? Okay. Excellent. So if someone wanted to learn more about that, I will pop it into the chat. And again, you can also learn about it by visiting www.getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca. I thought I would just mention that because I know that the people in the room tonight are probably very interested in that. Okay, so a question that Sarah asks is, what % of social housing budget goes to administration? Over to you, Ruth. I think you mentioned that in the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a great question. And actually, I mean, it might be easier to get the slide back up with the actual budgets, just to kind of talk through that, because it is a good question. And sorry, Julie Lee or Colin, just to not to put you on the spot to go back to those slides. But I think we receive some funding from the federal and provincial government for housing, but most of it is municipal funding that goes towards housing. And I know this slide is a bit high level, and it's obviously rolled up between all the different departments. So you will see the salary, wages, and benefits line, which is just over $8 million. But again, it's covering a very large staff team. I am, and I don't want to, because I will be very honest, I don't have the percentage in front of me, Sarah. And I also don't want to put my colleagues on the spot, but I'm just wondering if perhaps Desiree or Lana can chime in here and give you the exact number or percentage.
Thanks, Ruth. So, yep, I've got some numbers in front of me. So for the administration piece for all of the housing services, so you can see on the slide in front of you, housing services, the net after all the other funds is about $12 million. Of that administration, of which a good portion of it would be salaries and benefits within housing administration, is about $800,000. So under $1 million. Whatever you do that in your head, less than $1 million on 12 million would be the percentage in terms of administration for all of the housing services activities.
Perfect. Sarah, thank you for that question. And Ruth and Desiree, thank you for working together to provide that response. Now I am just trying to navigate back to the question slide. I'm impressed that I got us back here. So while I do that, just a reminder that there is the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen if you want to pose a question. Sarah, you have asked a number of very good ones. So I'm going through them and finding the ones that are budget related, and also just want to make it open for everyone who's in attendance tonight to also add their question to the queue. So one of the questions that Sarah asks is, why does the Integrated Care Hub pay rent to a developer? So Ruth, is that a question that you can take about the Integrated Care Hub and the rental arrangement?
Sure, I'm happy to take that, Julie Lee. And again, excellent question, Sarah. The Integrated Care Hub is really a program that we created in response to a multitude of factors. First of all, obviously in response to the pandemic, in response to an opioids and drug poisoning crisis, and also in response to an ongoing housing supply issue. So I think, again, the question at that point, back in, just over a year ago, we were initially temporarily providing a service at Artillery Park. And at that point, we obviously needed to look at, an alternative location, because the amount of clients that are benefiting from the Integrated Care Hub was significant. We did a very intense search for locations and for different solutions. And the location on 661 Montreal Street was the location that was the most appropriate for the service. Obviously, that is a building that's owned and operated by a private landlord. So we are paying rents to that private landlords to be able to use that space for the service. I will be honest, I don't have the details of the numbers in front of me. I will say that the Integrated Care Hub funding and a lot of the kind of work that has happened over the last year and a half we have been mainly able to fund that through actually COVID specific provincial funding, the social services relief funding that we received to support these types of initiatives. I hope that answers your question. I know that there's been a lot of conversations around these kind of new projects. They all have been, presented with all the details to City Council as well, and they all have been able to also been part of that conversation. So I hope that helps, Sarah. Great question.
Agreed. Thank you for coming so engaged and with these great questions, Sarah. So we've answered that one, and we're going to, I'm just looking at the time, and I want to respect everybody's time in the room. So we're going to get to just a couple of more questions, and then we will proceed with the rest of the presentation, which will include other ways that you can engage on the 2022 budgets. So if you are in the room and you have a question that you would like to get in, I see we have one here from Andy, and it's regarding a 24/7 warming center. So Andy asks, is there going to be a 24/7 warming center for those that are refuse shelter and do not require the safe injection site? The 1.1 million that was going to the hub will be used for a warming center. So I hope that I've accurately captured your question, comment, Andy, and Ruth. I'm wondering if that's something that has been budgeted for, or if you can speak to it. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, great, and good to see you, Andy. And thanks for asking that question. So first of all, and again, that kind of goes back maybe to Julie Lee's earlier comment around the homelessness system review. So we obviously are looking at, the best way to support clients that are most vulnerable and either living rough or are at risk of homelessness. So I will be honest, I don't have an answer. That's not necessarily me deciding, but we are looking at obviously through the system and at the Housing and Homelessness Committee. And Andy, I know you're at that table as well. We are looking at obviously the best way moving forward with the system, not only trying to address how we best utilize the funds, but also how we are addressing some of the access pieces regarding how people can or cannot access the shelter. So I will be honest, I don't have a perfect answer for that tonight, but it's definitely something that will be part of the conversation moving forward.
Thank you, Ruth. And Andy, thank you for that comment. I'm just going to mention really quickly that I did include a link to the engagement page in the chat. So Andy, if you or others on the call are interested in learning more about the homelessness system review recommendations, I invite you to click on that link. Open it in your browser now, but stay with us for the rest of the presentation. Okay, so final question this night tonight goes to Claire, and Claire is asking if there are any plans to change ODSP or Ontario Works to give recipients a better quality of life where affordable housing is not currently available. Ruth, is that a comment that you can speak to?
Yes, I think that's a fantastic question to end tonight, and I'm sure we can also follow up on other questions that we're not able to answer. But Claire, so great question. I mean, there's a couple of things I would say. First of all, unfortunately, the one kind of reality is that we as a service manager are mandated certain the actual rates that people receive when they are in receipt of social assistance, either OW or ODSP, which is delivered directly by the province. But what I will say is there is some really great work happening on the provincial level, and also obviously we're trying to work through that locally, regarding really wrapping around the right supports and referrals for clients when they are on our caseloads, and really moving away from a lot of the administrative burden and the need to kind of check off a whole bunch of boxes, but really focus on how we can actually provide services and supports to clients in the community. So although we locally cannot change some of these income levels that are set, we can again look at how we best collaborate with our partners and have a good referral mechanism in place. So if a client comes in, and yes, we are trying to fix, and add more housing supply, but we're also, hopefully able to find the right referral to some of the other supports. And again, I mean, the reality is that we also see, obviously healthcare and mental health is a big area that we are seeing the needs, but having a good system in place so clients can be referred and supported through that whole journey. And the last thing I will say is we have there is work happening on the provincial level, and that will be downloaded to us as a city to kind of really focus our work or kind of take out the employment piece and work with employment Ontario funded agencies and work through the employment services transformation, but have us as housing and social services staff really focus on what we call the life stabilization of clients. And I know that sounds really like maybe a little bit high level, but ultimately that is really focused on if a client comes in, we will help them with their dependent needs, their housing needs, their childcare, their health needs, and their potential employment and education needs. And obviously, we don't do all of that in house, but we really try to create that network around the clients. So that might not be answering your question completely, but there's definitely some really good thinking and some systems level kind of change, and hopefully we will be able to again locally implement that as best as possible for our clients.
Claire, thank you so much for that question, and a huge thank you to everyone who came ready to engage this evening. I am going to proceed to the next slide and turn the presentation back to Desiree Kennedy, but just a quick note that all of the questions and answers will be summarized by the project team and posted on the Get Involved Kingston page, which you can access at www.getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca. And with that, I will turn it back over.
Thanks, Julie Lee, and thanks everybody for some great questions, and to Ruth for some great answers to those questions. Ruth, I'm not sure if you mentioned or not, and I apologize if I just missed it, but there is I think it was your 2020 year-end housing and social services report that was just recently released, and I'm assuming folks could Google that on the city website and see a copy of that. And I would highly recommend that if you're interested in any of the three areas that Ruth has been talking about tonight, it's an excellent report. It's very easy to read, and it's got some great information in it in terms of what's been happening and even what's coming and what we're looking at in terms of each of those three areas. So I certainly would suggest if you have interest, looking at that up on the city's website and taking a look at that report. So in terms of just a couple of things on next steps, so just talking a little bit about the impact that your feedback and your input has in terms of the budget. And we get this question all the time, can I impact the budget? And then of course, certainly what are the next steps? So just in terms of what we do with this input going forward, as we're finishing up the engagement process, which will happen by mid-August, staff will be reviewing and summarizing all of the input that's been received through each of the engagement activities that we've done. So certainly from the 4 virtual sessions, as well as the survey information and some of the other feedback that we've received will all be reviewed and summarized. From a timing perspective, the departments are just starting to look at their 2022 budgets at this point. We do have 4-year operating budgets that are prepared, so we have a starting point from last year for 2022 that will be updated over the next 2 or 3 months. And so the input that we have been receiving from these sessions and from some of our other activities will be shared with the departments, and so they will have that concurrently as they are developing the budgets and can consider in terms of what that impact might be, not only for 2022, but as they do projections for the next 3 years, as well as their capital budgets over the next 15 years. Their 15-year plans are updated. They'll be able to take that, and that may have some direct input in terms of this year or certainly the coming years in terms of the input. So we will make sure that that information is shared. We'll be closing the loop with a report to council and to the community in September that will also summarize all of the feedback that we've received. So council will also be in the know in terms of some of the feedback that's come back, and that will certainly influence the budgets in terms of the deliberations that are scheduled to be held in November this year, and that will be the budget deliberations for the 2022 operating and capital budget. So be assured that your input does impact in terms of our budget development and the actual budgets at the end of the day. Next slide, please, Julie Lee. And then finally, in terms of ways to engage, so as I mentioned, this is our last of our 4 series session, our virtual budget sessions, but we still have a couple other things that are ongoing. We will be in Market Square on Thursday, August the 5th, starting at 8:30 a.m. So we will have a tent set up there. Come on out, visit with us. You can do the survey, which is also still open until August the 9th, or just chat with us and give us some of your input on all things budget related. So feel free to come out on August the 5th and meet up with us at Market Square. The survey is open, as I said, until August 9. You can get a copy of that and do the survey at getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca, which is our project page. You can also call our call center, 613-546-0000, and you can arrange to get a hard copy of that. And we've got other ways in terms of being able to fill that survey out. So I encourage you to do that. Also encourage you to go to our getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca page, the 2022 budget engagement. There's lots of information there. You will find the recorded sessions from these 4 virtual sessions will be available, as lots of other budget information. We've also got there an opportunity for folks, if you've got any idea around a specific project or an idea that could positively impact our community, there's a spot there where you can offer that idea. Those will also be summarized and go back to the departments and to council as part of the report in September. Or if you don't have an idea right at top of mind, you can go and take a look at the ideas that are there and like certain ones and add your comment in that way. So again, we encourage you to visit that page and to engage with us. So thanks again for joining us tonight. Great questions, some great discussion, and I'll put that back to you, Julie Lee.
Thanks, Des. One more thing before we let you go, so you can enjoy the rest of this Monday evening, is we're going to ask you to complete an evaluation poll. And Colin, if you could actually launch that for attendees now. If you've attended one of our virtual sessions previously, you'll know that we host these polls so that we can hear from you on how we're doing. And I will note that you have to answer every question in the poll in order for it to submit. So please do give us, if you could give us just a couple of more minutes of your time, perhaps even one, it's going to help us continue to improve our process. If you are a repeat attendee, then I might sound like a broken record to you, but We did just begin to undertake these virtual budget sessions as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have been at it for a little while, but we're continuously looking to improve our process. And the only way we can do that is through your input. So if you could tell us how we're doing, how we can improve, it would be much appreciated. So we are seeking 100% participation. And again, it should be on the screen before you, and you will have to answer every question in the queue. And just as we're waiting for everyone to complete that poll, I would just say that Desiree and Lana from the Financial Services Department were actually, and Scarlett were at the market on Saturday. And, you know, aside from getting to go and share your input on the budget, it is a great opportunity to get some baked goods, some local veggies. So, two birds with one stone, really. So if you are able to pop by on Thursday, August 5th, I do suggest that you do so. It's a great opportunity, just one more way to engage. And if you know someone who may not necessarily be online, but they prefer to go out, then if you could share that event with them, that would be much appreciated. So we're just going to keep the poll up for a minute longer. We are again seeking 100% participation, and these polls again help us improve our process at the end of the day. And one thing I just, you know, we've been saying it every week because this is our fourth and final virtual budget session, but thank you so much to everyone who attended. Your input is much appreciated, and people came with great questions at each session. And, you know, the community is essential to the running of our city and the delivery of our programs and services. So thank you for that. Okay, so with that, I think we will close the poll. So Colin, I would ask you to end it. And again, thank you everyone for joining us for this fourth virtual budget session. And you can revisit this session or the previous three at any point by visiting www.getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca and clicking on the budget engagement. So on behalf of the project team, have a great week and we'll see you soon.